It was announced today that the Washington Redskins are going under a review process to possibly look at changing their team's name after receiving a lot of pressure from corporate sponsors such as Nike and FedEx to do so. When I tell you this 2020 Black Uprising is moving mountains, now, a lot of response has been, geez, do you have to change the whole team's name? What about tradition? Is Redskins really offensive? Historical context is needed to understand why the use of Native American mascots is offensive not only way back in the day, but now in 2020. During the early 1900s, it was the worst time for Native Americans in this country. The federal government purposely sought out to extinguish Native American culture, and they did this by establishing civilization regulations, basically forbidding Native Americans from performing their traditional ceremonies, forbidding Native Americans from speaking their language. Not only that, they took Native American children out of their homes, away from their families, and put them away in boarding schools with white children to assimilate them. Captain Richard Pratt, who fought in the American Civil War, made it his life mission to educate and civilize the Native American. He coined the phrase in a speech back in 1892 that said, "Kill the Indian, save the man." That's where that came from. Get rid of Native American culture and make them more like white people. These racist attitudes towards Native Americans were the norm amongst white Americans, and it was within this atmosphere that the use of Native Americans as mascots became widely popular. Enter George Preston Marshall. George Preston Marshall was the original owner of the Washington Redskins. Back in 1933, he moved his team, the Boston Braves, to Washington and renamed them the Redskins. Who was George Preston Marshall? George Preston Marshall was a staunch segregationist and racist who was a leader amongst the NFL owners, much like Jerry Jones is today, who led the charge to ban African Americans from the NFL. And he continued to refuse to integrate his team for 30 years until the federal government forced him to do so. So what do you think he thought about Native Americans? Contrary to popular belief, Native American advocacy groups have been fighting to remove the use of Native Americans as mascots for over 50 years. It's really unfortunate that those aren't the voices that we hear in mainstream media. Why has Washington kept this team name even though society has moved forward consciously? Racism, white supremacy. Numerous psychological studies and reports have shown that Native American youth are negatively impacted when exposed to seeing mascots and caricatures of their beautiful culture, especially in a time when violence against Native Americans is disastrously high. Native Americans experience violence more than any other race from people outside of their race. Think about representation. The moment we're in right now, the Black Lives Matter movement, the call has been for representation. And if you go throughout your week and the only time that you really see Native Americans portrayed in mainstream media is sports mascots, that's a big problem. Representation matters. This name change is long overdue, and you see how quickly Dan Snyder is responding to the moment because corporate dollars are being taken out of his pocket. I'm personally looking forward to the change. Washington Renegades, or the Washington Red Tails as an honor to the Tuskegee Airmen, or the Washington Warriors. Change either happens from within or it's forced upon you. Dan Snyder, do what should have been done a long time ago. Change the name.